Happy New Year to all of you. I can see that you all have missed our sessions, and I'm very happy to hear that. I have definitely missed hearing Ram. So welcome back to our Good Living Practices sessions. This is session number 15, where we explore the options from his best-selling book, Good Living Practices. And it's an interactive session that explains how the sciences of yoga and Ayurveda, coupled with modern science, may be applied to our lives to achieve optimal health and happiness. So in today's session, what we are going to look at is something which is very, very important. And I know that it has had an important impact in my life. The discussion, the importance of brain-colon nexus and how this affects our physical, mental, and emotional states. We will cover the following aspects. Optimal elimination. Why is it important for your health? Optimal elimination is linked to optimal digestion and good immunity. Factors that affect bowel movement. Consequences of poor bowel movement. So these are things that, even though it may seem a little bit gross in some ways, it is actually very important, because if our body does not function in its natural progress, then it has so many effects, and we feel kind of lethargic and stomach upset, and all kinds of things, headaches, and so many things are a result of not having a proper bowel movement. And it is important because that it affects all parts of your life. And so I'm so glad, Ram, that you have taken this aspect of it, because this is something that needs to be discussed, and this is something that I'm looking forward to hearing you. Without much further ado, Dr. Ram, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Radhika. Good morning to everybody on the Pacific time zone. Good afternoon for all the other people in the other time zones. Since we are meeting for the first time in this new year, Happy New Year to all of you. And thanks again for joining this 15th session of Good Living Practices. Before we start this session, on behalf of everyone, I'd like to express my condolences on the passing away of Lataji. Lata Mangeshkar, as you know, has soulfully rendered thousands of songs that touched everyone's heart. And the reason I bring her up is because in one of her memoirs, Lataji actually mentioned about how her daily practices, she doesn't call it good living practice, but she calls it daily practices, sadhana. And she says she followed all those sadhanas to the T. And the reason being that she had to maintain her voice, sustain her voice. She could sing in 4 different octaves, and she had to maintain that till the right age of 70s or 80s. And to do that, she had to really consistently maintain her sadhana, daily living practices. And that also included a lot of the good eating practices that we discussed in our GLP. And so I thought I'll just briefly mention that. So good living practices, as we all know, are tools or interventions that keep the body, mind, and emotions in sync, functioning as one unit in order for us to experience optimal health and wellness. And when they function independently, that's what results in poor health and suffering. And so let me now, with that brief introduction, share the slides and recapitulate what we discussed so far, and then we'll focus on today's topic. So in the past 14 sessions, just to recapitulate, we discussed about the importance of mindfulness while cooking and eating in order to achieve optimal health. We also saw the benefits of physical exercise and mental training exercises for improving overall immunity at all levels, because immunity is not just at physical level, especially with the COVID. The word immunity has been described everywhere in all the news media. But please remember, immunity is not just at the physical level, it's also at the level of the mind, and it's also at the level of emotions. And then I discussed the importance of selfless service in order to bring harmony to the body, mind, and emotions. We discussed the importance of bringing in harmonious impressions to the five senses or the five portals of gateways, the sense of sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. Because remember, I told you about how these are the filters, or these are the main gateways through which we bring in impressions. And what we bring in through these five senses is extremely important for us as we go on with our lives in terms of good health and wellness. We discussed the importance of fasting, and I mentioned about how fasting brings harmony to the mind, body, and emotions. We discussed sleep and its importance, and how sleep actually boosts physical, mental, and emotional immunity. We saw the benefits of chewing and how chewing helps to bring these three units of individuality in sync. And in one of the other sessions, we talked about the importance of maintaining a good blood sugar levels. And Chandarji, one of the members in this audience, he actually provided us fantastic details about his own journey and how he manages, his management of blood levels of the sugars. And then I spoke about negative emotions and how it has a profound effect on the body, mind, and emotions. And in the last session, that was in the month of December, we talked about the importance of what we when we eat and how we eat. And then, of course, we had a question from one of the readers. And so today's topic is about the brain-colon nexus. Okay, and today's topic will actually focus on the aspect of constipation. I know some of the pictures are gross, and I know the topic itself is gross, but please believe me, this is one of the most important, fundamental physiological process that is part of us. Okay, it's ingrained in us, and it's very, very important that we pay attention to this aspect of the body as well. Now, even though it may appear that the brain is on the top of the body and the colon is at the south end of the body, still there is a close nexus or an interaction between the brain and the colon, and each one influences the other. And this can be seen, one of the most notable examples of this brain colon nexus is in the aspect of elimination or bowel movement. Okay, imagine or think about the time when you have had missed bowel movements, or if you have had difficulty in passing your stools, and if that persists for a longer time, how did that show up in your brain? How did it show up in your mind? I'm sure you must have all had some kind of an emotional problems with that, because what happens is there is a close association between the brain and the colon, and this and the brain sends signals to the colon. The colon actually can serve independently as well, and I'll talk about that later. And this has a profound influence on our emotions. Now, one of the pathological processes that happens where this brain-colon nexus is firmly established is with regard to constipation. And constipation is infrequent bowel movements or difficulty in passing stools. Now, if this condition persists for a long period, when you talk about long period, it means several days or even a couple of weeks. It is what we call chronic constipation. Now, interestingly, modern medicine considers constipation as having bowel movement that is like 3 or less than 3 in a week. Whereas in Ayurveda, we consider constipation as even missing 1 bowel movement on a single day. Okay, and the reason why this is very important is because if you see worldwide, especially in the United States, nearly 20% of the population suffers from constipation. And the cost of treating this alone is somewhere around $900 million a year. Now, treatment for chronic constipation depends on what the underlying cause is. Okay, and however, in some cases, we don't even know what the cause is. So when is it considered constipation? If you do not have a daily bowel movement, if it's not regular, I'm talking in terms of Ayurvedic definition. Okay, if you have lumpy or hard stools, if you're straining to have bowel movement, if you feel that there is some kind of a blockage in the rectum that prevents complete evacuation, if you feel that you're not able to empty out completely, if you feel that you need to press on your abdomen, in order to have a bowel movement. All these, if you have one or more of these conditions, then think about constipation. And constipation is considered to be chronic if you have experienced one or more of these symptoms on the regular basis, either it's day-to-day basis or on a weekly basis. So remember one thing: you may have the pleasures of an affluent life. Okay, a lot of richness, a lot of wealth, a lot of prosperity, maybe several houses, several beautiful cars, everything, and having vacation time in grand places and all that. But that's all at the physical level, at the surface level. But if you have chronic constipation in the ladder of health and wellness, you are occupying, maybe at the ladder of affluence, you are at the top. But in terms of good living, or in terms of healthy living, if you have constipation, then you're occupying the bottommost rung of the ladder in terms of good health and wellness. So it's very important that you think about this on a long-term basis, and especially if you have had constipation, then you should really think about ways to address it. Now, the thing is, occasional constipation is a very common thing. People experience that on a occasionally. Okay, it doesn't interfere with your ability to do your daily tasks. For example, now we just returned from India, and so what happens is that long distance coupled with a severe jet lag of about 15 to 18 hours can cause constipation. Okay, unfamiliar territory. I don't like to go for campings, mainly because what happens is when I go to a campsite, it's an unfamiliar territory. They may have bathrooms and all that, but still, it's not like home. And so that mental feeling of being away from your home can trigger constipation. Think about that. I mean, you may have had travel to some place, maybe to your relatives or to your friends or somewhere outside, and think about the day when you have had, at least the first day of your travel, maybe you have had constipation. That's possibly because of unfamiliar grounds. Okay, the mind has got so used to doing whatever you've been doing at home, that when you try to go to a new surrounding, it just doesn't like it, and so it plays havoc with your colon. Certain medicines are known to cause constipation. Okay, especially antibiotics. Okay, a lot of stresses at work, especially now these days we are going through a lot of stresses. Think about your bowel movements. Improper sleep. People who have had improper sleep will show it in the form of constipation. Okay, any problems with your colon or rectum in terms of blockages, in terms of growths, in terms of tumors, can block the passage of the feces. Okay, tiny tears in and around the area, any blockage in the intestine itself, any cancers, any narrowing of, sometimes what happens is the colon itself will narrow down. Narrowing of the colon itself can prevent bowel movement. Sometimes what happens is everything may be fine, the structural aspects may be fine, but the functional aspects of the colon may be disturbed. For example, the nerves that supply the information to the rectum in order for the passage of the feces. We call it the peristalsis movement. The peristalsis is where what happens is the nerves facilitate the movement of the passage of the feces. So if you see the structure of the colon, you have what we call the transverse, the descending and the ascending colon. It's through this entire area the feces has to pass, and that requires for the constant movement of the intestine, the intestinal muscles. Okay, and if for some reason the muscles are weak, that we see that as we age. Okay, it's a natural movement. The muscles become weak. So when they become weak, what happens is there is no peristaltic movement, and this causes blockages, and this prevents the normal passage of the feces. There are other pathological conditions like multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, spinal cord injury. Spinal cord injury is one common thing that we see where people start having constipation issues. Stroke is another issue where people start having bowel movement problems. Okay, and then the other thing that I've noticed, especially after with my training in yoga, and having done a lot of yoga, I've seen that people who are not very flexible with their pelvic muscles, so pelvis, the sacral area and the pelvic region, the hip regions, That's the functional aspect. Okay, structural aspect. That's where we have the organs, especially the colon and the small intestine, the large intestine. So if you have problems with the pelvic region, the hip regions, and the muscles surrounding the pelvic areas, that can cause problems with the movement of the feces as well. And then certain hormones are also that are known to facilitate proper bowel movement. If these hormones are dysregulated, it can cause problems with the feces movement as well. There are certain conditions like hyperactive thyroid gland or pregnancy or diseases that can cause any of these issues. Now, if none of these things apply, okay, if none of these things apply, then you need to consider about, what are the ways that we can bring about normal bowel movement, okay? And once again, I bring back the concept of good living practices, because good living practices, we talked about nourishing foods, okay? We talked about what are the low nourishing foods. We talked about incompatible foods. We talked about eating at random times. All these can influence your bowel movement. Eating very close to your sleep time, too frequent eating or too frequent snacking, eating in a noisy environment, not chewing the food properly. All of these prevent proper digestion and absorption, which can lead to poor bowel movement. And then, of course, among the good living practices, poor quality sleep, poor quantity sleep. So it's not just about poor quality, it's also about quantity. How many hours of sleep are we getting? Okay. Sedentary lifestyle. So that's the reason why physical exercise is extremely important, especially if you're facing chronic constipation. Lack of physical exercises, too much of sedentary activities can all lead to poor bowel movement. Now, the colonic tract or the colon in itself is very sensitive to emotions. Okay, and emotion or emotional turbulence can affect the colon very, very drastically. And so one of the things that you should experience is, or that you should look back is, if you have had chronic constipation, look back at your own mental status and notice if there is a lot of anger or sadness or depression or anxiety, and if it's been there for the long time. Because if it is there, then that can affect your colon as well. Because what happens is, we know from evidence-based studies that the brain has got a direct effect on the colon. And so any emotional disturbances triggers stress responses, which in turn affects the colonic movement. So we have to think about that as well. Ayurveda, and it's interesting, this is not in modern medicine, but in Ayurveda, we have a close relationship between the colon and the skeletal system. And that's one of the reasons why in Ayurveda, whenever people complain about having skeletal problems, okay, problems with the knee, problems with the hips, problems with the spinal cord, unexplained pain, or unexplained inflammations, then the first thing as Ayurvedic doctors we ask is, how is the bowel movement? I often have people complaining about migraine headaches, about unexplained headaches, about pain in the lower back, about pain in the hips, pain in the knees, okay, especially when they are climbing the stairs or when they are getting in and out of the car, they have severe problems with their knees. And so the first thing I ask them is whether they have poor bowel movements. And even if they say, oh yeah, we do have bowel movements very regularly, and I ask them, what's the definition of regularity in your case? And if they say once in 2 days or once in 3 days, I'll say, that's not regularity. Regularity is if you're having 3 meals in a given day, there's no reason why you should not have a bowel movement the next day. It has to happen every day. And that's the reason why in the Ayurvedic community, we take steps to address the colon and to normalize the bowel movement, especially for people with skeletal abnormalities. Now, many people are unaware of this skeletal system and colon connection. And so without realizing it, they keep complaining about unexplained headaches and joint aches, without realizing that one of the ways to bring down the pain is to correct their diet, to correct their sleep habits, and to improve their gut and improve their colon function. And as I keep saying again and again, if you have 3 nourishing meals every day, there is no reason why you should not have a bowel movement the next day. Okay? Because remember one thing, chronic constipation is not just about having infrequent bowel movements. Chronic constipation can lead to a gamut of diseases, whether it's diverticular disease, whether it's hemorrhoids, whether it's fissures, whether it's rectal prolapse, colorectal cancer. One of the reasons for colorectal cancer is constipation. And that's the reason why, in this country, they tell you to take a regular colonoscopy. One of the main reasons. Constipation is also a prelude to the other problems affecting the skeletal system, as I mentioned here, and the nervous system as well. Okay, and Ayurveda always says that if you have a proper bowel movement, then it supports your bones, it supports your brain, it supports your spine, it supports your joints, it supports your ligaments. Okay, and which means that if you have poor colon function, all these areas are going to get affected. And it is my belief that chronic constipation and a host of other colonic disorders are primarily arising mainly from a highly ultra-processed, low prana diet, okay, that is devoid of fiber and water, plus all that we discussed earlier, improper meal timings, not eating in the proper environment, not properly maintaining your physical body, not maintaining your mental exercises as well, not having proper mental exercises, not having good quality of quantity sleep. All these can affect. The reason being that all these are going to influence what goes on into your brain, which then impinges on your colon as well. So all these practices that I talked about in the last 14 sessions are extremely important when it comes to addressing the colon. And there's another important aspect of the colon which all of us should remember. And this is based on modern science as well. Okay. According to modern science, our body has got a second brain. And guess what? Which is that brain? The colon. Modern science considers the colon as a second brain. In fact, use the term colon intelligence on Google and you'll see why it is considered to be as the second brain. The reason being that colon actually can function at several times without instructions from the brain. Just as the brain has got billions and billions of neurons and neural connection, the colon is endowed with neurons. And the reason for that is because this neuronal firing, what we call the neuronal firing, is what coordinates the muscular contractions of the colon in order to facilitate the passage of the feces into the various areas and out. So this, interestingly, this neuronal firing in the colon, okay, the pattern of neuronal firing is very similar to the rhythmic pattern of neuronal firing in the brain as well. Okay, and that's the reason why the colon is considered to be the second brain. And this rhythmic pattern is so striking and similar, okay, and this is what actually helps us, okay, in the brain. This helps us with memory recall. It helps us with all kinds of thought processes, okay. And so what modern researchers think is that in addition to memory and thought processes, it's this neuronal firing that is helping in removing the waste. And that's one of the reasons why the colon actually influences our emotions. Think about the time when you have had improper bowel movements, and think about what it led to. I know from living example. I mean, this is a true example. We recently returned from India. One of the reasons why we went to India is because we had to be, caregiving our mom, and my mom was in the hospital for 3 days. She didn't have a bowel movement because unfamiliar grounds, medicines, antibiotics, and all that. And so I knew from experience that she's going to have an emotional disturbance. Why? Because she's not been eliminated. She's not been eliminated. And sure enough, on the 3rd day, she had all kinds of emotional turbulence. She was angry, she was negative, she was, all kinds of emotions were coming up: rage, anger, anxiety, worry, fear, everything was coming up. And the minute she had a bowel movement, Okay, on the fourth day, she was like, okay, I know why I'm here in the hospital. She was more cooperative. She was more, open to suggestions. So think about the times when you have had an emotional upheaval and think back to see whether you have had a bowel movement. And sure enough, and this is especially true if you're in a workplace and if you have a boss whose day is not good, whose morning is not good. Okay, and I've had a very good relationship with my boss, and so I generally approach them and say, him and say, do you have a bowel movement? They said no. I said, okay, try go to the bathroom and have a bowel movement. So it's very important. I know it sounds gross. I know it may sound very funny, but there is an important underlying message here. Bowel movements is closely linked not only to your body, but also to your mind as well as to your emotions. And we need to make sure that we overcome these bowel movements. I mean, we overcome the problem of constipation and have a regular bowel movement. Okay, so if you notice a pattern of missed bowel movements, make sure that you're eating a very good diet. Make sure that you're eating timely meals. Make sure that you're chewing your food well. Make sure that you're loading your food with fiber. Okay, fiber is an extremely good way to promote bowel movement. Leave a gap of 3 hours between meals. Make sure that you have a daily dose of physical exercise. Okay, and if you are having constipation as one of the issues, make sure that in your physical exercise you're focusing more on sustaining or on strengthening your hips. Abdominal and hip areas are very important when it comes to focusing on physical exercises. Make sure that you're calm before you eat your meals. Make sure that you chew your meals well. Make sure that you check on your medications. Several of the medications can result in dehydration. Okay, and this dehydration can result in poor bowel movement. So you have to have along with the medication, make sure that you're hydrating yourself very well. Now, there is an aspect of science called toilet science, and in toilet science, they talk about toilet posture. Okay, so think about addressing that as well. Okay, because there is a way of, so improper bowel movements can also be because of improper toilet posture. It's very important that we raising the knees and flexing the hips. That's what the actual posture is about, raising the knees and flexing the hips. When that happens, what happens is the anal opening is wide enough for the fecal movement, for the feces to pass. So there are things that you can modify. In this country, especially after we have come, we're using the modern day toilet, okay, but we can still bring about the posture of squatting. Squatting is supposedly the best way of evacuating, and everyone agrees. Okay, the only problem is as we age, we cannot squat, and so we have moved to the modern day toilet. But in the modern toilet, you can still bring in the process of squatting. Okay, by modifying the way the toilet is adjusted. Okay, so that you get the same squat-like feeling. Good quality sleep is very important. Sleep 3 hours after dinner. Try not to delay your sleep cycle. Try to drink warm water, hot to warm water, with suitable herbal teas that have very good influence on the colonic movement. And the next time you have a migraine, or you have a chronic low back pain, or you have an unexplained joint pain, or you have skeletal muscle abnormalities, think about when you had your last bowel movement. That may provide you a direct link. All right. So I know this topic is unusual, but I wanted to address it because, in my opinion, this is one of the most important physiological processes that we have to address. And as I said, there are a lot of people out there that have poor bowel movements, and we need to address that. And so that's the reason I thought it's very important to discuss it. Okay, so let me stop here and let me take your questions. Any questions? Radhika, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I was on mute. So thank you very much, Ram. As you say, this is a very important topic. At the risk of seeming to provide TMI, too much information, I can definitely say that, with regard to constipation and hemorrhoids, I've been there, done that. And, one of the jokes in our family with my grandmother used to be, we were just talking one time long ago, and we said, what is the definition of happiness? And she chimed up, and she said, the definition of happiness, in my opinion, is having a sumptuous, delicious meal, and then a few hours later, going to the toilet and evacuating. And, and we all started laughing at that. But when you think about it, that is actually, it brings up such a sense of relief.
Yes.
So it is definitely, as you said, mentioned, it is a very, very, very important aspect of it. And I remember when my daughter was a baby, she had difficulty in passing, her stools, and the first time, and we had to put in suppositories to help her with that, and or give her banana and all that. And she would cry, and the moment she would pass the stools, she would be a very happy, very, laughing and everything back to the normal. But how important it is, and her stomach used to feel hard, and even soon after she passed this thing, it used to feel normal.
Right.
So it really, from day one, as soon as you're born to the day you die, this is an important aspect of, this is what, to be honest, this is what you live for.
Right. And that's the reason, Radhika, why in Ayurveda, there's an entire chapter, two chapters that devote time and attention only on the colon and the colon function, not diseases. It's just about normal colon function and the importance of bowel movement. And, even though it is gross, no doubt, but remember, we are eating at least three. We have our eating habits all over the place. We are eating all kinds of foods and all that. But it's just not about the eating. When we can enjoy the eating, what happens to the waste? It has to come out somehow. It has to come out. It cannot accumulate, because the waste is toxic. After all, it has to come out, and so it has to be addressed. And the problem is, when we don't address it, it leads to so many problems. And so, and I like your analogy. Smiling is something which I've noticed in a lot of my patients too. When they've had a proper bowel movement, they come with a smile, and I know, okay, something is in the right direction here.
Correct. It is a big relief. And, my son, when he was little, and, he was about 3 years old or something like that. And he had a condition where whatever he was eating was not getting digested. It was not getting digested. So, and so whatever he was listening, and he lost weight because he was not getting the nutrition from it. And so, he had to be, and it was Ayurveda and homeopathy which helped him, get that back online, because there was not much of a help with the other medication. So, but how important it is, and like you said, the headache or the migraines and everything is so related. Your mood is so related to that. And it was very nice to hear the example of how your mother's mood was affected. And you can definitely, I can relate to that. Having been there, like I said, there.
I was, because Padma and I were taking turns to go to the hospital, so I would text her, "Did it happen?" And she would say, "No, not yet." And then I would say, "What is her mood?" And Padma would write saying that she is very upset. She's not very cooperative. She's very angry. So it went on for 3 days. And then on the 4th day morning, she said, "Ram, it happened." And then I went there to the hospital and get it there. I see a big smile, and she's like, "Okay, I think I'm doing fine," all that. And I knew the answer. Why there's sudden change in emotions? It's because she had a nice bowel movement. So there is, and so what, and by the way, this is not just Ayurvedic interpretation. Even modern science, actually, if you type in emotions and constipation, there's an entire science that talks about how emotions affect and constipation and vice versa.
Correct. And you're right about this thing. It's also, like you said, vice versa, because when you're stressed, you notice that you're more constipated, because and you notice that there is a tightness in your stomach,
Yes.
which and you're not able to that's why it is important to relax, as you said,
Right.
to let it take its course.
Correct.
And so that is, and also the quality of the bowel movement. That was one thing that I wanted to actually talk to you about.
Yes.
Was the quality of the bowel movement. There was one time on, I think it was on Oprah or something like that,
Yes.
and it was kind of a little gross to hear that, but
Yes.
she said that the quality of the bowel movement should be that it is tubular, and it is long, and
Right.
in the form of like a long string,
Right.
and not this thing. So, but that, and that, I think, is an important point. If you have anything to share about that.
Let me tell you one thing. I mean, and that's what modern medicine believes, saying that, I mean, and of course, even Ayurveda has descriptions of various, in fact, Ayurveda has got a description of various kinds of stools. Even modern medicine has got various description of stools, and they'll tell you which is the right, which is the incorrect or anything. But in my case, as a practitioner, what I say is that as long as you have a regular bowel movement, it doesn't matter what the shape is. Okay, if you have had a 3 meals and if you have had a regular bowel movement, because what happens is they are all individuals with different constitution, and Ayurveda talks about that. They're all different constitution. Because of our different constitution, we have, even though we're eating the same food, even though we may be eating the similar kinds of vegetables and fruits, still every individual's what we call the microbiome, or the bacteria that is present in the colon and in the stomach, differs. The composition differs from person to person. And because the composition of the microorganisms differ from person to person, the amount of stool, the shape of the stool, the size of the stool, and the volume of the stool, all this will differ. Okay, so there is no true gold standard. Okay, even though Oprah, I still remember Oprah's show where the practitioner was talking about the log-like issue, the banana-like formation, all that. But I don't want to go there, because I don't want to create a fear, because
Yes.
people may say, oh, I had very loose stools. That's fine, because there are some people, what we call in Ayurveda, the pitta kind of people, who will always have loose stools. Okay,
Yes.
but it's, as long as it's regular, as long as it's daily, it doesn't matter. People who have log-like stools, as long as it's happening daily, and as long as you're not straining, and as long as you're satisfied, it doesn't matter. People who have got very low volume of stools, okay, doesn't matter. We call them the vata types. As long as you're having it daily, as long as you're not straining, and as long as you're satisfied, it doesn't matter. Okay, so the take-home message is, don't worry about the size, the shape, and the volume and the mass of the stool, as long as it is happening every day without straining. Okay, because straining is please remember one more thing, and I didn't put a lot of stress here, but now that Radhika has brought out, I'm telling you, if you strain, one day is okay, but if you constantly strain, my friends, it's very dangerous, because one of the leading causes of stroke is straining in the bathroom. People time and again have reported having a stroke when they were in the bathroom. Okay, I've known at least of half a dozen people who have died in the bathroom. Okay, because and their diagnosis was stroke. Why did they have a stroke? Because they were straining. Okay, and then what happens is you get a cerebral stroke. You have locked your bathroom. People cannot come in to take you to the ER, and then you die there because of the stroke. Okay, so please do not strain. Okay, that's the last thing you want to do. Okay, if you don't get it, wait for some more time. Okay, and there's one more thing that I would like to recommend here. If you have a constant problems of constipation, my suggestion is, even if you don't get your bowel movement, go and sit on the what do you call the toilet at a given time. Create that habit. So every day, for example, if you want to evacuate at 7 in the morning, go and sit at 7 in the morning, even if you've not had a bowel movement. Okay, this is especially for people who have got constipation issues. So what happens is, you're training your brain, so that what happens is, in 3 or 4 days time, having establish that timing patterns, you will definitely have bowel movement. So train the brain that way. That's one thing. Okay. And don't worry about the mass. Don't worry about the volume. Don't worry about the size. Don't worry about the shape. That's another thing. The third thing is try to avoid things like the pills that come to aid the bowel movement. Even if you have to take that, try to take it, but try to see if you can overcome that habit. Okay, because pills are not the long-term solution. Try to have a lot of fiber and a lot of vegetables in the form of vegetables and fruits. People do take things like senna and cascara sagrada, which is in terms of psyllium husk and all that. Those are all one or two occasions it is good, but on long-term basis, what happens is they actually create what we call gaps in the colon structure. Okay, because they are more of a purgative than laxative. So what happens is they purge the intestine, and when they purge, they actually damage the walls of the intestine on the long-term basis. So you don't want to do all those psyllium husks and all those cascara sagradas and sennas and all that. Okay, the best thing is try to be as natural as possible by taking a lot of fruits and vegetables.
Correct. No, you're right, because when I was newly married, my father-in-law used to insist that I go to the bathroom every morning, and I used to feel, why is this man like intruding in my privacy, and why is he saying that? But he meant very well, because he knew, and he knew that that I was suffering from constipation, and I had he was being helpful, and I would credit him with my regulating my life, because at that time I found it very annoying, and I was just felt that it was an intrusion to my privacy, and but he was because of him I developed the practice of going to the bathroom in the morning and trying. It wouldn't happen, like you said, it wouldn't happen every time, but over time it kind of regulated, and I will credit him with that practice. I know it is TMI, but it is something, it is a fact of life. It is a fact of life, and it affects every aspect of it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so now let me just there are a couple of things. I think Shankari asked the first question, and so there is let me go to that question. So does the fiber intake, either as a fruit or vegetable rich in fiber, or as a supplement, solve the constipation issues?
Yeah, try not to take it as a supplement. It's always good to take the fiber in form of fruits and vegetables. The more food, in fact, in one of the good living practices I mentioned about, when we talk about snacking, I said use, instead of taking any processed foods, one of the snacks that you can consider is a bowl of fruits or a bowl of vegetables. Okay, morning, instead of one of the best breakfasts you can have is a big bowl of cooked vegetables. Okay, cooked vegetables will a mixture of cooked vegetables. They add a lot of fiber. In the afternoon, if you want to snack, you can take a bowl of mixed fruits. Fruits have got a lot of fiber. They have juice in them. Both vegetables and fruits have a lot of vitamins. They have a lot of water in them. All these are extremely helpful for the colon. So try not to take supplements. Try to take it naturally in the form of fruits or vegetables.
Right. And I think we also covered this one where it says, does the bowels discard shape and color make a difference?
Yeah,
and
I told you that.
Yeah.
With regard to the color, please be mindful of that. Now, there are certain medications that can change the coloration, so don't be alarmed with that. Okay. The one thing that you should be very concerned about is if you see blood in your stools. If you see blood in your stools, and if you see it once, it's okay. But if you see it on a regular basis, then you really have to meet your doctor, because that's not a normal thing. You should not see blood in your stool. But other than that, the coloration may come from the vegetables you eat, from the fruits you eat, or from the medications you take.
Yes. And Sriram has a question: is Triphala helpful?
Yes,
I found Triphala very helpful after you recommended.
Unlike those other things, the psyllium husks and all that, Triphala is extremely good. Triphala is non-addictive. Triphala is doesn't cause any problems in the long run. Okay, Triphala is actually dried fruits. It's of three fruits, so that's why it's called Triphala. Okay, and those three fruits are dried and they're powdered, and they're, in the olden days we used to take it in the form of a soup. We used to add 1 tablespoon of that into either water or juice or dal, and then we used to drink it. But these days, because nobody likes to taste it, we take in the form of pills, which is fine, not a problem. Now, people who have had chronic constipation may notice that Triphala doesn't help them. Okay, now Triphala, unlike what a traditional Ayurvedic practitioner will tell you, Triphala is not just a laxative alone. So that's one of the reasons why I say Triphala is very important, very good for the body. Triphala is one of the functions is a laxative, but it has got other functions as well. It brings down the mass of the fat. Okay, so it's very good for people who want to lose fat. It's very good as a detoxifier. There's one fruit called haritaki. Haritaki is very good for the liver. It's very good as a detoxifying agent. So people who have had a lot of infections will benefit from Triphala. So it's a liver cleanser, it's a colon cleanser, it's a kidney cleanser, it's a heart cleanser. So it's an overall tonic. So, and of course, it has got a powerful laxative action as well. So that's the reason why Triphala stands far above compared to the other things out there in the market when it comes to aiding your bowel movement.
And the other question from Shankari again is, do diabetic medications, do they have an impact?
Well, they may or they may not. Depends on what kind of medications you take. I'll leave it to people here in the audience who have had issues with sugar and who have been taking either metformin or glipizide or other medications, whether that has an effect on the bowel movements. I know, so for one thing, people who have had issues with sugar, management of sugar, you want to address it naturally. And one way to address it naturally, and Chandarji, if he's in the audience, he'll let us know about his experience. One way to address it naturally to regulate your blood sugar is to take a lot of vegetables, especially bitter vegetables. And guess what? Bitter vegetables have got a lot of fiber in them. So they aid in the bowel movement. Okay. They will not suppress the bowel movement. But when it comes to specific diabetic medications, I leave it to the audience, members in the audience, if they want to chime in here. Chandarji, are you there? Do you want to talk about that? Whether medications to you, sugar medications, did it affect your bowel movements? Well, we'll talk about that. Maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was mute.
Okay.
Just listening to you.
So
yeah, the medicine. Yeah, the medicines, metformin and all that do create constipation.
Okay.
And the best way, as you just explained, is to vegetables and fruits.
Very good.
I mean, I used to take Triphala to manage that before.
Right.
And after I've started vegetables and fruits, it's just a go in the morning and you're done.
Wonderful. That's super. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I remember you mentioning this. So I'm glad you're confirming that. So yeah, I mean, just not diabetic medications in general, especially antibiotics, especially the ones that we're taking for on a routine basis, okay, for a long-standing chronic illness. All these medications will have an effect on the colon, mainly because what's happening is all these medications change the microbiome environment in the colon. And the minute your environment changes, the microbiome environment changes, it affects your bowel movement. Okay, so it's just not diabetic medications for that matter. Any medications. I know in our clinic in Apollo Health, we have medications for Alzheimer's disease, for Parkinson's. All these have a profound effect on the colonic movement as well. And so that's the reason why, number one, we always try to address long-standing chronic cases. We try to address the colon first.
Yeah, Mr. Ram, I have a quick question. You did mention about the mind's impact over the bowel movements, right? So my question is, sometimes if we are so stressed about taking an interview call or facing something which is very very important, but then you are so stressed out of facing how to face it. So in that case, it is the opposite thing. It is kind of not constipation, it's kind of a loose motion kind of thing. So what is it like? Is it Does any kind of emotion particularly cause the constipation, or is it like, I mean, I'm just trying to ask
So
you.
emotions, I'm glad you brought that. Emotions have, when I talk about constipation, emotions have a profound effect on the colonic movement. Okay, it's just not constipation. It has an effect on the colonic movement. Okay, so if emotions create more heat in the body, then that's going to trigger a loose bowel movement. Okay, that's the reason why you have loose stools. If the emotions create more coldness, then that's when it's going to create constipation. So that's the reason why, and in Ayurveda, we have a great working relationship. Emotions like anger, jealousy, competitiveness, okay, fiery competitiveness, or any fiery emotion, they create excessive pitta, and pitta is the heat, and that causes loose bowel movements. And that's the reason why, prior to any of the things, if you have a chronic stress, especially of the heated stress, you'll have loose bowel movements. On the other hand, if you have a lot of depression or anxiety or fear, all these are cold emotions that can cause what we call contractions of the colonic movement, and then that results in constipation. So it could go either way.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Actually, my sister's daughter had a problem with the urination. She was discarding protein in the urine. And that one day we didn't know, that was the first time. She just bloated like a rubber ball, like she just bloated. She couldn't pass it. It was an emergency issue, and the doctor did it in another way around rather than the regular way, kind of tubed or something. And then from that time onwards, she was on steroids. So it's very pathetic to see how people suffer when they're not able to discard the waste when it tries to be accumulated.
People who are on steroids, within the second day after steroid administration, they will have issues with the bowel movement. Steroids are known to, because especially corticosteroids are known to greatly influence the colonic movement. And so that's the reason why it does not. So it's interesting why it does that, because if you notice, for people who are on steroids, it dehydrates the colon, and then it allows the water to accumulate everywhere else. And so that's the reason why your hips, your face, your knees, they'll all swell up when you're on constant steroid medications. And because the fluid is accumulating in other areas, the colon gets dried up, and then you have problems with constipation. And so that's the reason why people who are on steroids, especially any autoinflammatory conditions where you're taking a lot of steroids, you have to manage it properly with diet. A lot of fiber, a lot of water, a lot of juices. It is a pathetic condition, but it can be addressed.
Thank you.
Padmavati has a question. Can you shed some light on irritable bowel syndrome?
Oh, yes. So, in Ayurveda, we call it stress associated. We don't call it irritable bowel syndrome. Irritable bowel syndrome is purely from the modern clinical view. As long as you have chronic stress of any kind, okay, stress of any kind, and irritable bowel syndrome is a classic example of what we call, the term we use, malabsorption. Malabsorption is a condition where you have alternating bouts of constipation and diarrhea. Can you believe that? So for 2 days, you're constipated. And then the third and the fourth day, you have loose bowel movements, diarrhea like. And then the fifth day, again, you'll go into a constipation. So this is the pattern that you see with irritable bowel syndrome. Okay. And nobody understands why. Go to any gastroenterologist. Okay. And they'll tell you, if they diagnose you as irritable bowel syndrome, you know what they'll do? They'll give you a 17-page document that says, how do you address your chronic stress? That's the medication. Believe me, modern medicine does not have, there is no medicine for irritable bowel syndrome. There is no drug for it. There's no injectables for it. The doctor will hand you a 17-page or 20-page document that says, how do you handle your stress? Only then will you be able to handle your irritable bowel syndrome. And that is true even in Ayurveda. In Ayurveda, we don't have the term irritable bowel syndrome, but we know that chronic stress can cause this repeated alternating bouts of constipation, diarrhea. So if you have IBS, please go back and check your stress levels and do whatever you can to bring down your stress. You have to do everything. I mean, some people, because the stress has become a part of their lives, they say, oh no, I'm not stressed at all. Okay, you have to go deep and then question their habits. And then you'll notice that there's a pattern of stress that has become a part of their lives. And that pattern has created IBS. So you have to address that, my friends. Definitely it is stress in some form that has triggered the IBS symptoms.
So are Crohn's and colitis come under IBS?
Same. These are all under the classification of IBS. That's right.
Okay. By the way, your rings are looking good on you. Earrings.
Me, you're asking me or you're telling that to Radhika?
No, I was telling you. You
Oh.
have.
Thank you.
So I'm. Any other questions on this topic before we move on to some questions we have from emails from people? Okay. So one question we have, Ram, from the email is, for the future, can you talk about one physical aspect, one mental aspect, and one emotional aspect that we could incorporate for that month? So each month we will have 3 tools to practice and inculcate.
Okay.
So you have a suggestion on that? So, yeah.
Sure, we'll do that. Starting next month, after either it will be a part of the lecture or it will be standalone practical application itself, where I'll talk about 3 tools that you can start incorporating for that month. And then, we can seek the opinion of everybody and see how you guys are doing for that month. I think it's a great session. Sure,
Yeah.
do that.
That's a very good question. Yeah, definitely. And then there was another question. As parents, we have difficult time convincing our kids. Have you thought about providing similar health and wellness classes, especially to high school kids and college graduates? So Ram and I were talking about this, how do we address this? And one of the things that we were thinking about is, if you have any, we would like you to contribute and send us some of the questions that you would like your kids to inculcate into their daily lives. That will help us to come up with some topics. The other thing that we were also thinking about is whether, if the kids themselves have any questions that they would like, we would invite them to ask us that. And the third thing that we would like is, if your kids, any of your kids is we would like them to take charge and maybe have a 10-minute or half an hour session in our GLP sessions where they ask those questions, and Ram is able to answer and provide them with some input. So we are looking at different aspects of it. And also, we are encouraging you to send us these kind of things which you want your kids to inculcate and have them as part of the audience. So Ram, do you want to add to that?
That's a great idea, and I totally agree with whatever you have said, Radhika. Kids need to inculcate some of this practice, most of these practices starting now, so they realize the importance of it. And usually what happens is kids don't like to take advice from their parents, but when it comes from others, they may, I don't know, but they may try to be more serious about it. And one way to empower them is to make sure that they themselves bring it on and, create a platform where they can address their issues and we can talk about it. So, which means that what Radhika was saying is, can we have a kid who is Radhika-like, who will moderate the sessions? Okay?
Yes.
Can we have a kid who is like Siddharth Kaur, who can upload the session for the kids? I'm sure there are high-tech kids out there who can do this for us. So,
yes.
and then a kid will gather all the questions and put them to the audience or put them to us. So definitely, we will definitely do this, but we want this because it's coming from the kids, we want their involvement. And so if the kids are willing to do that for us, this could be middle-aged and college graduates, okay? So they'll be more aware of all these things. And, we'll definitely work with them and we'll do this. Not a problem at all. We would love
future this thing, we will be covering some of it, but we just want, in order for the kids to be to inculcate these kind of habits in the beginning itself, it needs to we have seen is that it's better coming from somebody who is a peer of their own age, or somebody close to their age, because they don't want to hear from old fogies.
Right.
So it's that's the thing, and whatever we say, it'll be better to come from them. We are also looking at seeing if someone in our youth volunteer group is willing to do something like that. But if any of your children is willing to help with this and put some program together and help it, we are definitely happy to work with them.
Absolutely.
and do something that will be kid friendly and kid receptive. Yeah,
very good. I'm glad, because it reminds me, because Padma's brother's daughter, who is now in senior high, she actually read the book and she said, Ram uncle, how do you make this more kid friendly? That was her question. Can you make it more kid friendly? So she felt there was a lot of messages out there for the kids. She felt it was very good for them, and she wanted me to actually, whenever, if at all I was giving talks, then make it a little more kid friendly. So I said, okay, fine, no problem, we can do that.
Yeah. So keep those questions coming, and we are here to help you, and I'm helping in the way of coordinating, and thanks to Ram for all his wisdom, and appreciate that. We want more people to benefit from this, and it is something that definitely is life changing, and we want more people to benefit from this. So please spread the word. And if there are no more questions, then we will end this session for now, and see you in March. And please continue to spread the word, continue to support our North Bay Hindu Center. And, and thank you very much for all the help, Ram. And we also have a small announcement. As a fundraiser in March, we have Sanskriti, which is in a classical dance and music program. So I will share some information in the group. So please support that and spread the word. And thank you very much. And we are also looking for volunteers who will share their experiences after inculcating these good living practices. So please do that, so we can have somebody like Chandar to do it. Thank you very much.